So I just read that 4 out of 5 people suffer with diarrhea. And my question to you is, does that one enjoy it? This is a total food makeover. We're going to keep this light today. I'm excited about this. We've been looking forward to this for months. And the reality is that when we go through this information today, we're going to go through foods that heal, foods that kill. We're going to go through why inflammation is destroying our bodies and how food plays such an integral role into that. We're going to talk about toxicity and the underlying factors of toxicity there. And this is information that we've really not covered in this depth before. I was just talking to somebody right before walking up here, and they said, when's the last time you did just a real focus on food and toxicity? And really, it's been years. And so for the next 3 hours, I'm going to try not to, with Dr. Phil Harris, feed you with a fire hose. Is that okay? I'm going to try not to. However, if this is your first entry point into Max Living, and you've not been exposed to the vitalistic model of health and nutrition, then this still might feel like a lot of information all at once. But I encourage you, just like Dr. Alcorn said, don't be overwhelmed with the vastness of the information and all the changes that need to be made. Just pick the 1, 2, or 3 things that you know that you can plug into and start doing that's going to move the needle. Starting when? Now. So we don't wait till Monday to implement change. We start when? Now. And so, I'm so thankful for this group, and you're going to hear from people who, have lost, combined hundreds of pounds, people who have reversed disease, gotten off medications. And the reason why we share the stories is really to give you hope. But the reality is, when you look outside of this room and you go out into the rest of the world, right now, as Americans, are we healthy or are we sick? Okay, the statistics are actually really bleak when you cover them. Listen to this. The brutal facts of what's happening right now in America. 65.7 American adults are overweight or obese. Heart disease deaths in the U.S. occur every 34 seconds. The Columbia School of Health says that is up to 95 to 98% preventable, by the way. Cancer in the U.S., 1,500 people die each day, 3,400 new diagnoses each day. Autism, what was once 1 in 10,000 in 1980 is now 1 in 37 here today. You look at our statistics right now with the kids. U.S. has the highest infant mortality in the industrialized world. Here, the United States. 54% of children are diagnosed with a chronic condition. So think about this for a second. We have the highest rates of infant mortality, and those who do make it past 1 year, we now have 54% of our children who now have and are developing a chronic condition. Blue Cross Blue Shield did a study recently, and they studied 55 million Americans, and they showed that millennials are showing a double-digit increase for 8 out of 10 of chronic diseases as compared to the Generation Xers. And what the Blue Cross Blue Shield study showed is that this is right now the sickest of the sickest generation in human history. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, because we live in a land of the free, and we live in a land where we have all these choices, yet you think about, we have right now the best of the best in modern healthcare. We're 5% of the world's population. Do you know now we take 70 to 80% of the world's drugs right here in this country? So picture this. There's a big pile of drugs that the whole world has access to, and here we are as Americans taking 70 to 80% of those medications. We have the best doctors. We fly in doctors from other countries to practice medicine here because it's the most lucrative. We have the best hospitals. We're constantly renovating our hospitals, are we not? We have the best of modern medicine. We take the most medications, yet we are the sickest of the sickest in human history here. In Hoosiers, how about the state of Hoosier health? Good or bad compared to the rest of the states? Bad. So Hoosiers, when we rank Hoosiers, versus the rest of the states, we have 34th worst in drug deaths, 40th worst in obesity, 41st worst percentage of smokers, and 42nd worst in infant mortality. So quite literally, we are one of the worst in the world here, in this state. Hopefully not in this room, because most of you and many of you have been living this way and have been making changes and are stepped outside of that paradigm. But my hope and my prayer for you today is that your eyes will be opened to a new way of living and thinking. If this is your first time being exposed to this, my prayer for you today is that this would be an enlightening experience, but not just enlightening in the fact that, oh, that's a good idea, because how many of you know information doesn't change lives? You have to do what with it? You have to take action with it, right? And so my prayer for you today is that you'll move and take action with it, because it's not our genetics. We're blaming everything on genetics, are we not? Everything. It's unreal. You go into a doctor's office, and I have doctors and nurses in my family, and they're good people. They're trying to do good things. I want to be clear about that, because as I'm going through this, sometimes I understand that because I feel inside of me this angst where people need to know this so badly, and they need to understand this, and they need to step outside of the pharmaceutical-driven market that we call healthcare. And sometimes it can sound like, man, he's ticked, right? He hates doctors. And it's not the case. What I do know, though, is that I love people, and I can't stand and watch people get hurt unnecessarily anymore. And when we blame this on genetics, and you go into the doctor and you fill out the family history form, and they see, hey, your dad had high cholesterol, your grandfather had heart disease, and so you have heart disease in your family. And so what's the whole conversation about for the rest of that visit? How you're at an increased likelihood of developing these types of diseases, whether that's cancer or diabetes, or whether that's heart disease. And so the conversation is this: here, take this in a preventative form. How many of you know what I'm talking about right now? Yep. Take this, and you want to minimize your risk. Hey, your cholesterol is a little bit high, take this medication. Or hey, your blood pressure is kind of going high. Let's not ask any questions about what could have caused that, what would have contributed to your high blood pressure that's going up, what would have contributed to your diabetes, what would have contributed to your gout or Alzheimer's or whatever it is that we're dealing with. But it's a lot of times here, because it's in your family history, unfortunately, you do have the predisposition, so here, take this. It's not genetics. 95 to 98% of disease is not genetics. Columbia School of Health said that. It's been reported in CNN. It's a lifestyle-caused epidemic, and now we have solution that is a pharmaceutical solution. And it's not working. If this was working, I would not have to be talking about this. I would not be talking about this until I'm blue in the face. I feel like I have to cover this, because this is the number one thing that I feel like is going to interrupt you from actually getting help and healing. And what I mean by that, right now, here in this country, in the last 20 years ago, the average person filled 6 different prescriptions every single year. That has doubled in 20 years. Now we fill on average, 12 different prescriptions every single year. 65% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. 12% have at least one chronic disease now. Does America really have the worst healthcare system in the world? The answer to that is resounding absolutely yes. We rank 37 out of 37 in one study. We rank 11 out of 11 in another study. Another study that ranked us, we ranked 8 out of 8. When you study the industrialized world, we were ranking dead last on every single category. And so we have to wake up. And what we're trying to do to help, which again is a lot of times tricking the body into having a better blood pressure, tricking the body into having a lower cholesterol, or tricking the body into whatever it is that we're talking about. What we're trying to use to help is actually that which is hurting. And according to the John Hopkins study, what they found is that right now, that form of healthcare and trying to help, but trying to help in a way that's trying to trick the body and manipulate the body into doing what we think it should do, is now the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. John Hopkins study claims more than 250,000 people in the U.S. die every year from medical errors. It's now the 3rd leading cause of death. Guess what you won't find on the CDC website? That right there. even though it was a Johns Hopkins study. And that's conservative estimation. When you combine hospital infections along with that, Gary Knoll was brilliant with his book, Death by Medicine. When you combine that with hospital infections, it's called nosocomial infections plus iatrogenic, that's doctor-induced. It is now the leading cause of death in America, killing almost 1 million people every single year. Again, they're not bad people. They're great people. I love them. Even people here, I know your heart. I know you're good people. But when it comes to the way that we're treating our symptoms, we've got to recognize that it is not working and that it is actually hurting. There's a new paradigm. It's a paradigm shift that is already happening here in America and in the rest of the world. It's a complete paradigm shift of the way that people view and manage their health. People more and more are stepping outside of that and said, no, I want to know what's causing my health problems. No, I want a solution and a path for health and healing for me and my family. I don't want a pharmaceutical intervention. I want real help, right? I know I might have caused this by my lifestyle. I know I might have caused this by the fact that I haven't been doing everything right, or toxicity. I know I might have caused this by not knowing this information a long time ago, or misinformation that was told to me back in the 80s or 90s or whenever it was. And I'm ready for a real solution. And we're seeing that more and more. We're seeing it in the network of Max Living. We have over 300 doctors nationwide and over 1,000 clinics, and we're seeing the trend that is happening. But as the movement is getting stronger, guess what else is getting stronger? The pushback. And you're seeing it. And I want to just make you aware of a couple of things that is happening right now that I also feel like is getting in the way of you receiving ultimately health and healing and help. One is what's happening on the internet. How many of you in the recent weeks have Googled something? Raise your hand if you've Googled something in the last couple of weeks. Keep your hand raised if that something in the last year was something health related, if you've Googled something about health. Okay. So we even use the term Google, yes? Let me show you why you're not going to be able to do that for natural health information any longer. I'll give you an example. How many of you know what a genetic modified organism is, aka GMO? Okay. If you're from, most of you know in Indiana what a GMO is. GMO is a genetically modified organism. We try to grow the crop faster, sometimes resistant to certain things. It yields more, and so the argument is that we can feed the world if we genetically modify our crops, right? So an apple that should be half the size of that apple is now double the size and resistant to certain things. So when we go and we chemically manipulate, just as we've described this, chemically manipulate nature, do you think that's going to end up having some type of effects long term? Yes, if we eat this long term. Okay, so if you're the average person and you're Googling GMOs are, would the next sentence come out, or the next word that comes out of your mouth, would it be GMOs are beneficial to the environment? Does that sound like a common search term that would happen? Okay. What has now been discovered and uncovered and has been admitted to by Google is that they are putting in bias for the suggestions. When you type in GMOs are, they've created these type of suggestions for you. So just read these. GMOs are good. GMOs are good for you. GMOs are good for the environment. GMOs are beneficial. There's one that says GMOs are harmful to the environment. There's one that says that GMOs are good essay. GMOs are created by Quizlet. When you actually look at what is being typed, because Google has Google Trends, you can actually look and see what are people actually searching for. When you go to the Google Trends, you'll notice that people are Googling GMOs are good, but they're also at a much higher rate Googling GMOs are bad at a much higher rate. And the amount of people who are actually Googling GMOs are good for the environment, zilch, in the last 12 months. I think I might have messed up their stat because I pressed on it. So you're going to see a little marker there, I guess. Let's do another one. A very controversial topic, vaccines. Not going to get into any of this as far as the vaccine debate, but I just want you to see The very first one that says vaccines cause adults. When you actually look to see what is being searched for, some people have clicked on vaccine causes adults, but what they're actually searching for is vaccines cause autism. At an alarming rate is what they're searching for. It's a mom sees her kid regress and wants to know, and when she types it in, vaccines cause A, it says adults. How about supplements? And this one's goofy. How about supplements? Supplements are bad, useless, not regulated, bad for you, dangerous, scams, garbage. Who's behind it? We know who's behind it, right? We know who's behind it. I mean, just look. GlaxoSmithKline joined forces with Google. GlaxoSmithKline is a what? Pharmaceutical company. They sold $715 million, and just that's one. That's just one partnership. They have several, but the reality is that if we're going to, and I want to be clear on this because this can almost sound self-serving to me that I'm telling you, listen, you're not going to get this information anywhere else. You're not going to be able to go home and Google natural health information anymore that is not research. I want you to know that's never been research. To dive deep into a topic, you're going to have to trust the source, and you're going to have to dive deep into that topic with books and actual research, because your Google search will not come back. You're not going to go 12 pages deep to find this information. You won't. People don't go beyond page 2. So if we want to be healthy, we just need our eyes to be opened to the reality is that it's getting harder and harder to get this type of information. But that's why you show up, you plug in, you keep showing up, and you keep learning and go deep into these individual topics, because ultimately our health is our greatest asset. Yes? Health is our greatest asset. When we lose our health, we lose everything. Yes? Okay, so I want to paint a picture of the analogy of the Great Lakes. How many of you are old enough to remember? I'm not, but in the 1960s, they pronounced Lake Erie being dead. Does anybody recall the Great Lakes problem? Okay, and do you remember why that they pronounced Lake Erie being dead? The pollution, right? And so it was industry that was dumping chemical waste into the water systems, and literally it was killing the ecosystem within the Great Lakes, and the fish were dying. And the offspring, as the fish were dying and washing up on shores, even the birds that would come and eat on the fish and who were toxic and had tumors, right? They would then go and up into their nest and have eggs that were super brittle, and the offspring weren't surviving. And they would also have different problems like cancer and growths and tumor growths. And we look at this, and we look at the Great Lakes analogy, and what biologist in his right mind would go to Lake Erie and look at the shores of all the fish that is washed up and see how the environment or the ecosystem internally was dead? What biologist in his right mind would go there and say, I have a solution. And here's the solution. We're going to set up tiny fish hospitals to treat all these fish as they wash up on the shore and catch and release them right back into that environment. I think that would help. Or you know what? Those tumors that those fish are growing, let's cut the tumors off and then release them right back into the environment. Or how many of them would say, hey, I know what we should do. We should take a bunch of medications and we could dump them into the water system, and that could then intravenously, they could get that, and then that would help them along the way, so we don't even have to wait until they end up on the shore. We could just do it that way preventatively. What biologist in their right mind would look at the disaster and come up with that type of solution? They would not. What was the solution to Lake Erie and our Great Lakes? We had to do what? Stop the pollution. We had to stop the chemical offshooting from the industry that was upstream. And then what did we have to do? We had to clean the water systems, right? And over time, Lake Erie came back to life. And the reason why I give you this analogy is because our bodies are the same, they work the same way. Our bodies are constantly recycling itself. Did you know that right now you have Every single year, you'd get a whole new set of skin cells. Did you know that? That your skin cells are recycling itself. Every 120 days, you get a whole new set of red blood cells because your red blood cells are recycling itself. Did you know that your stomach lining changes every 6 months? New cells make up your stomach lining than they did 6 months ago. Isn't that amazing? Your body is more like a fountain than it is a sculpture. So it is constantly replacing itself. It's constantly recycling itself. We're not like a sculpture where, things break and they can't ever heal. No, if you cut your leg right now, your leg's going to heal, right? Leg's going to heal. You didn't have to think about that. Your body's constantly doing that. In the same way that the lakes and the fish and animals and plants, they just need the right environment for health and for healing and to thrive. Our bodies are the same way. And this is the foundation upon which the entire seminar is built, is from this understanding that we are a perfect design, that our bodies don't need help. It needs no interference. We need to stop interfering with what our body's trying to do because our body is constantly trying to heal. Constantly. Our bodies are constantly trying to balance itself according to the environment, constantly trying to adapt to the stresses, constantly trying to adapt to the things that we put on it. And so the question is not, what drug do we need? It's what's interfering with your body's ability to heal.